and welcome to the Happier Marriage Podcast, a podcast for spouses longing to have a happier marriage so they can feel more connected, desired, and supported. Now, to start the show, here is your host and Sherpa, licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, Kingsley Grant.
Thanks for joining me on this show. This is episode 20, and today we'll be exploring the topic of practice in these 5 habits and have a happier marriage that lasts. This show is brought to you by kingsgrant.com. Our hope is that you will be challenged, inspired, and encouraged in the episode as in every other episode. So stay tuned.
So, the big question is this. How is it possible that you have a happier marriage when you feel like you've tried everything? Your spouse isn't making an effort. You're exhausted. You feel like giving up. Or there's so much hurt that's taken place between you and your spouse. That is the question, and this podcast will give you the answers.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen of Happier Marriage World? I hope you're ready for another round of the Happier Marriage Podcast. Today, we are talking about what the 5 habits that, when practiced in marriage, will create a happier marriage, but also a lasting marriage. I have found that these habits are so essential to a marriage that it cannot be emphasized enough why they are this way and why they will not only lead to a happier marriage, but also a lasting marriage. Now, this is a broad promise about being able to have a lasting marriage. It's almost like a guarantee. Well, nothing is guaranteed, as you know that. So some things I might say might trigger you. But remember that what I share is to help you, is to inspire and to motivate you and to have you think through, talk to your spouse about, and possibly make some changes in your own personal life. So if you're triggered, remember that is the purpose of this show, to stir things up and then take you in for a safe landing. Make sure that whatever you do, whether you agree or not with me, stick around to the end because I have a special gift for you, no matter how you think. Thanks for joining me on this episode. As you've already heard, we are talking about 5 habits that lead to a happier marriage that lasts. Now, having counseled and coached hundreds of couples over the past several years as a licensed marriage and family therapist and certified relationship coach, and from what I've experienced as a husband of more than 3 decades, I have narrowed down some habits to these 5 that I believe, when practiced, will not only make your marriage happier, but also will have a lasting effect on your marriage. Now, are you ready to get into these 5 habits? I believe you are. And so let's kind of dive in without any further ado. The first one that I believe, and by the way, these are in an order I thought that was so essential, but the first one I believe is so critical that I want to emphasize that the others can be rotated as far as how you sequence them. So it's not like this is the order they have to be in, but here's what I know. They have to be practiced. That's all I know. They have to be practiced. The first habit is what I call the forgiveness habit. The forgiveness habit. You know, I wrote a book several years ago called the Forgiveness, right? Forgiveness. How to forgive when the mind says yes, but the heart says no. Now, the reason I wrote that book was because I find that this is an area that is such a struggle for so many couples, right? It may be a struggle for you, and for good reasons. You may have been in a situation where your spouse, your partner, have done some things that you find it very hard to forgive, right? Is that so? And you might be struggling with that today. As a matter of fact, as I'm speaking right now, you may say, Kingsley, you don't even know. You don't understand what I had to go through, what I've been through with my spouse, my husband, or my wife. You don't understand. And you know what? You're right. As a counselor and a relationship coach, I have heard situations so many times from people that I just kind of listen, but my heart is like, twisting when I hear about some things they have been exposed to, what they have to go through. And when I talk about this idea of forgiveness, now I don't jump to this right away. I have to somehow help that person, that spouse, to kind of get to the place where her heart is ready to forgive, or his heart is ready to forgive. I find most times that some men, some husbands are, and again, this is more a stereotypical statement, they will just kind of, kind of quit, right? They will exit the relationship much faster when it comes to being offended, especially if their wife have cheated on them or done something of very severe, painful action or offense. They are more likely to, because of pride and ego. It's easier, I find. I wouldn't say it's easier to, but they will exit the relationship much faster than a wife does, right? She will want to fight. She will want to find ways to work towards, how can we make this better? How can we change our relationship? How can we get back to where we were? That kind of thing, right? So one of those things that I find is they have to learn how to forgive. So when I wrote the book about forgiveness, and I call it forgiveness because I see forgiveness as a gift that is given to someone who may not deserve it. So your spouse, your husband, your wife may not, you may, in your mind, may feel like they don't deserve what it is you have to offer them, which is forgiveness. Now, forgiveness is never easy. So I'm not going to sit here and tell you that what I'm asking or what I'm suggesting here is an easy thing, because those who would say it's easy, I would say have not been truly and deeply offended. A deep hurt from someone who have experienced a deep hurt from their spouse, it's an uphill battle. It's not a one-off thing. It's not something you do so readily, because your head, your mind is saying, yes, I need to forgive. And you make the case of why, but your heart is been so wounded, right? That you're thinking, I don't know. My heart is not letting go. This pain is so deep. I can't find it within me to forgive. I want to, especially if you are a person of faith and understand true forgiveness, that God has forgiven you. And you now know that you need to offer forgiveness to someone, because you think about what you and I have done when it comes to our relationship with God. If we do have one, if you have one, I know I have one. I realize that God has forgiven me of so many things. I mean, God has forgiven me of things that I don't deserve to be forgiven for. And you know what? Neither do you. So if you are a person of faith, then you might struggle even much harder than someone who is not of faith. So if you're listening and you are not of faith, you might find that, Kingsley, this doesn't sit well for me. You're asking me to forgive someone, and you're right, my friend, it's hard. Now, if you're a person of faith, then we have been prescribed about how to go about this whole thing, because we have been told in the Bible that says, for those who are seen almost like an enemy, who have taken a position or a posture where now they would seen as an enemy, right? Because they have done such things to us that we feel like they're an enemy of us. The Bible says, feed, and, if your enemy is hungry, feed him or feed her. If he or she is thirsty, give them something to drink. Now, that's not an easy, it's almost like, very opposite of what we hear in our world today. We hear get even, don't get mad, get even. So it's hard to go against a culture and a society that is really anti, for the most part, forgiveness. It's almost move on. Let's move on. Let's cut ties and move on. But my friend, listen, there's something about learning to forgive somebody who've hurt you that really raises your level of a person who understands what it is to truly grow and mature in your relationship, because you are going to hurt your spouse. I've been married for over 3 decades, and I can tell you, in my wife's and my relationship, there are times that I've hurt her and she's hurt me. Times that I've hurt her that she may not have told me, but I could tell. And times she may have hurt me that I didn't tell her, but she could tell. And even sometimes she've hurt me that I didn't even, I just kind of found a way to make certain that I did not communicate that non-verbally or verbally, right? So it's not an easy thing. And so I want to make sure I emphasize that. But this habit of forgiveness, of walking in the forgiveness of your spouse is so critical. Now, again, it's not easy, right? It's not easy, but I'm not asking you to do the easy thing. I'm really saying to you to do the right thing because you yourself have need to have been forgiven. Somebody somewhere along the line, I'm sure in your lifetime, have forgiven you, and you're so grateful they forgave you, right? Whether it's a sibling, a parent, a friend, a coworker, somebody you've offended along the way who have said them to you. You've asked them, you've pleaded, you wish they would forgive you, and some have forgiven you. So you know what it's like to be forgiven. And so if you have been forgiven, why is it that you are not going to want to forgive your spouse? He said, Kingsley, it's different. You don't understand how deeply. And my friend, listen, I get it. But this is one of those habits that I believe that a relationship that's going to be happier and lasting must practice. It's not an option. You must practice this habit of forgiveness. Now, again, it takes maturity. It takes a deep work. And it may take for you to see a professional counselor or a coach, someone who can walk you through and help you to come to the place together. So you might need an outsider to help you in this aspect of forgiveness, right? Because there's some other variables I believe that needs to be mentioned and brought into the picture that this show will not have time to do all of this. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. And that's the first one I mentioned about the forgiveness habit. The second habit I call is the dating habit, the dating habit. Now, some culture may not see dating as something important because that's not something that they do. I'll give you an example. Now, I know I'm from Jamaica. Now, I'm not saying it doesn't exist in Jamaica because I know when I was trying to, be in a relationship with a girl, I wanted to take her out. I wanted to take her to the movies. That's a date, right? And some couples do that. But in my home, that never happens. I've never seen my dad when he was alive or my mom, going out on what's called a date. A date is simply saying, let's take some time just to be by ourselves, away from everyone, away from the kids. Some couple will say, oh, I went on a date. I said, well, was that you and your husband or you and your wife? And they said, oh, no, I brought the kids along. That is not what I'm talking about, my friend. It means you have to take a time where you set aside some time to do something with your spouse. And it doesn't have to be anything too extravagant. It could be something very simple, right? It could be going for a walk that every single week or every other week. I suggest you do at least once a week, if not once every 2 weeks, if possible. Now, I know some situations where there are exceptions to that because a spouse may be working in another country or maybe some military duty or whatever official duty, and they can't be present. So I'm speaking to those who have, that's the exception, those who have a partner with them on a regular basis, a dating habit. And sometimes even when you might be apart, you could probably get on the phone or not on the phone. Nowadays we have video call, and where you spend some time, just you and your spouse talking through things, just looking through the virtual world in your spouse's eyes and whispering nice things to them and so on. And just paving the way for when they return home. Watch out, right? When they return home. But dating habit means is taking a time and say, we're going to spend at least some time once a week where it's just us. Life is so busy, especially when you have kids, right? I know I've heard so many excuses. I've heard the reason why you can't because, the kids are young and we don't have a babysitter and nobody wants to sit I've heard it. But my friend, listen, it's very important to understand that this is your long term. Kids are going to grow up and they're going to be gone and you're going to be left with your spouse. So it's investing for the long term. And so it may not be what a person who don't have kids can do when they go on a date. It may not be where you can spend a lot of hours away on a date, but it's just something, a time carved out where you're going to sit down or go for a walk with your spouse and just kind of spend some time together. It's that quality time. It's that moment where You pull away from everything, the hustle, the bustle, the activities of the day, and just quiet your heart. Now, again, my wife and I, we worked on this for a long time. In the early stages, it wasn't something that I placed a high priority on, and neither did my wife. Now, it doesn't mean that we didn't want to. Circumstances was where we couldn't at the time. But after we kind of realized the need for this, we began to figure out how do we do this. We tried different days, different times of the day until we landed on right now Fridays is our date evening. That is on the calendar. Means nothing can disrupt or somehow dislodge that time. And yes, an emergency can happen, but outside of an emergency, we're going to be on a date, right? We're going to be on this date. And so we will spend some time away and we do different things, but that is our time carved out for our relationship. So our relationship knows we're going to have that moment. So we don't have to be too anxious about the week. If we're going like two ships passing in the night, we know we're going to somehow get together and land those two ships, or somehow land those, be together in that dating moment where we're going to talk about things and catch up and whatever else that we will do in that moment. It could be coffee, it could be tea, it could be dinner, it could be snack. Something that you do is what we call a dating habit. It's one of those habits I strongly urge that you get into. The third habit, and this is so critical. This is one of the very, very important one, and that's a listening habit. I cannot tell you how many couples will say to me, my husband, my wife doesn't listen to me. She doesn't, he doesn't. And fingers are pointing because we are so wanting to get our way. And I find sometimes in couples where one spouse wants to win an argument, want to win in a relationship, so they don't have time to listen. What they do is they are waiting for the other person to come up for air. I mean, just to take a break, and then they go for it. And they are just wanting to pick up and defend their position. Listening is a skill. Actually, it's what I call active listening. It's not just any kind of listening. It's active listening. There's a skill that is needed here in active listening. There's a number of components that make up active listening. And you can look those up if you want to, but there are some, not everyone do this very well. You ask the average spouse, are you a good listener? And they will tell you, of course I'm a good listener. You ask their spouse, is she a good listener? And they'll tell you otherwise. You ask the kids and they'll tell you otherwise, right? Because listening requires a discipline of the mind, a discipline to be present, a discipline to be patient. And these are disciplines that really is so essential in a relationship. And listening, when you practice listening, active listening, it forces you to be this way: patient, present, be patient, present, be kind, right? Be empathetic. I mean, all those skills and emotions have to be in play. So it's work. Active listening is work. It's not just hearing, it's active listening. And I believe every relationship, if you're going to have a happier marriage and a lasting marriage, you've got to practice the listening habit. Learn and start now to do that. Number 4. So we talked about the forgiveness habit, dating habit, listening habit. Now we are on the serving/sharing habit. Now, serving habit has to do with serving the other person the way they want to be served, right? Now, what do I mean by that? And you've heard the terms love language. It's using that idea. I call it the love currency, right? It's being able to transact this relationship with a currency that the other person is used to. Imagine that you and your spouse, right, are from two different cultures or countries, or that use a different currency. And you were to go to see that your spouse in their country, right? And you are from some other country that use a different kind of currency. When you go to hers or his current country, you got to change and exchange your currency for the one that she uses or he uses, so you could transact business in their culture, in their country, right? Why? So you're going to use the currency of the country to transact the business. That is what the country knows and demands and expects of you. That is why they know that you want to do business in their country. It's very similar to your relationship. Your wife, your husband needs to know that you're serious and you're committed to do business in their country. That means, how do you serve them? How do you share with them so they can hear you? For example, maybe your spouse is somebody who has, their love currency is, it could be, your whole 5 gifts of, love languages, that words of affirmation, quality time, gifts, physical touch, and the other one is physical touch and I mentioned quality time, right? And what did I miss? I miss quality time, gifts, words of affirmation, physical touch, and I mentioned all 5, right? I mentioned all 5. Anyway, that's not the point here. And if you can look that up. If I miss one, then forgive me. I'm just kind of getting this going, and I don't want to get bogged down by that. So I call that a currency. So, for example, me, in my country, my world, my love currency is words of affirmation. So my wife, when she comes into my world, for me to hear her, for her to transact business with me, and having me as a focus of that, she needs to get the currency of my country, of me, which is words of affirmation. That is where she tells me she is committed to really doing business with me, and she has my best interest. She wants me to hear her. She wants me to really respond to her. That's how she began to enter my world. For her, physical touch is her current love currency. So I got to go and also do that very same thing. Now, you see what it does? It takes time. It takes effort. It takes work. It requires you to do something that you may not want to do right away. But listen, if you're going to connect and be able to have happier marriage and lasting, this has to happen. Is to serve according to how they want to be served. If your wife, your husband likes steak well done, don't give him or don't give her steak rare. Why? Because that's how you may like it, right? And we tend to give people what we want for ourselves. We serve them according to how they desire to be heard, to be listened to, and how they want their quote steak, right? That's a serving/sharing habit. And the 5th habit is one that I think people many times couples take for granted, and that's called the gratitude/appreciation habit. How many times I've seen couples, I have been out with couples sometimes or sit across some couples where I can see a spouse will do something for the other one, maybe bring them some water or a drink or hand them a napkin or something like that, or a knife, whatever it is. Say they're out eating and not even a thank you is said. It's almost like taking that person for granted. And that just irks me so much. To me, it's like disrespect. It's not valuing what it is your spouse have done for you. And I wonder, in your home, how often do you tell your wife, thank you, for whatever she may do that day? Or you might say, that's her responsibility. That's her duty. Why should I say thank you? Or vice versa to your husband. Why should I say thank you? Why? Okay. Is it that do you want a happier marriage? Do you want a marriage that lasts? That's why. Get in the habit of learning to say thank you. I try to practice this, and my wife will tell you, and she does this very same thing for everything we do. If I handed her some water, thank you. She handed me some water, thank you. If we're eating and she handed me something, thank you. A napkin, thank you. I guess is one way we were brought up, but also we've also committed and are intentional in practicing in our relationship. We just don't want to take each other for granted. And this habit of gratitude and showing appreciation is one that I find is so lacking in so many relationships. And my friend, if you want a relationship that lasts and is happier, I want to tell you, practice the habit of gratitude. So these 5 habits, I believe, will lead to a happier marriage and a marriage that lasts. Again, it's a forgiveness habit, the dating habit, the listening habit, the serving/sharing habit, and the gratitude appreciation habit. Now, I would love to hear from you what your thoughts are on this. Does this in any way, which of these habits are you practicing or not practicing? Which of these habits you need to work on? I would love for you and your spouse to take this, listen to this as you listen to this podcast, listening to this recording. I'd love for you guys to sit down and ask the question, are we practicing these 5 habits? Or which of them we could work on? Now, don't beat the other person over the head if they're not practicing them. Just say, hey, you know what? I think it'd be important for our relationship if we started doing this. So I'd love to hear from you what your thoughts are, and if you are practicing any and all of them, and how that's working out. Is there one that I've missed? Is there some other habit you would want to let me know that would also be fitted? I believe there's 5. I've kind of narrowed down to 5 that kind of covered a big expanse of areas of the relationship, but I'd love to hear. I'm open to learning. So if you are thinking of something else, please make sure you communicate that with us. And you can do that by listening to the end of the show, how you can get in touch with us, of course, through any social media, but also through the email. And we have a special gift just because you've taken the time to listen to this end, right? Whether you agree with me or not, I'm still going to offer you a special gift, because I want you to know that I want to see your marriage succeed. So listen up and make sure you get your free gift from listening today. Thank you for taking time to watch and listen to this episode. Now, stay tuned and hear the rest of how you can get your free copy of this gift that I have for you, and how you can stay in touch and connect with us.
We've come to the end of another exciting show, and if you enjoyed this podcast, 1, make sure you give this show a rating and review. 2, subscribe to the show to get all new releases. And 3, get your complimentary copy of the 5 Secrets to a Happier Marriage ebook at kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. Again, it's kingsleygrant.com/HMS ebook. See the link in the show notes. Do it today. Don't delay. Thanks so much for listening, and make sure you tell one other spouse about this show, or better yet, share it with them. Until next time, may the Lord bless you and keep you, and make his face shine on you and be gracious to you. May he turn his face toward you and give you his peace, both now and forever.